What's up, YouTube? So this is actually my first video of 2025, so Happy New Year's for everybody who's watching, and boy, do we have some good news to kick off 2025. So Arturia Pigments 6 has just launched, and as far as I know, this is a free update to previous owners, and this one is particularly special for me because I was actually involved in the update. So I actually did a bit of sound design work for a couple of presets for the factory pack for Pigments 6, and this update is also really cool because there's a couple of really cool features. I think it's probably one of the coolest updates that we've had for Pigments since the beginning. Not just because I'm sort of into physical modeling and modal synthesis, but just because there's a kind of ton of features and some really cool sounds and stuff as well. So anyway, let's dive in and have a look. So one of the coolest new features of Pigments 6 is the new Modal Engine. So we had the harmonic engine before, which is an additive synthesizer, and modal synthesis is similar, but the way it differs, you're still dealing with partials and harmonics, but the way it differs is it's using filters as opposed to raw oscillators. So with a modal synthesizer, you're sending it a burst of noise or some kind of burst signal, and then you're using the resonant capabilities of different filters that are tuned to those harmonics to get those different kind of sounds. So while the additive synthesizer was really, really cool for creating kind of all sorts of otherworldly digital sounds, the modal oscillator really excels at creating kind of realistic, acoustic, and organic kind of sounds. So the basis of how it works is you've got these kind of transients which you can feed into the system. So you've got various different inputs that you can choose. One is just a kind of transient sample. One is the audio input that you can kind of send into Pigments. And then collision, which I think is just like a burst of noise. Then you've got this friction system. So basically you've got like a transient, which just sends the initial signal through the filters. And then the friction is kind of like another noise signal that you can kind of send through the system to excite it in different ways. So this is really cool to assign to envelopes to give it a different texture, like a different texture. For example, with the transient, you can have a particular sound. With the sustain or the body of the sound, you can kind of have a different kind of tone. So we're going to start out with this transient input, right? And to kind of get, to really hear the kind of resonant capabilities of the modal oscillator, what we want to do is we want to turn the release up of the envelope, the kind of master amp envelope. Because then we can just like hit the key and release, and we hear that kind of like decay tail, right? We can kind of get a bit more of a accurate representation of the release of this oscillator. And already we're getting a kind of string-like sound by just fiddling a little bit with those parameters. So if we take away the transient and we use the friction instead using one of these envelopes, so let's say, for example, send envelope 2 to the volume of the friction, we can kind of get a more bow-like sound. And because these filters are kind of baked into the oscillator, it's polyphonic, which is really, really cool. So you can kind of get these really expressive kind of sounds. So what we can do is we can assign the velocity to one of these parameters like density, as well as perhaps the brilliance, and then we get like a little bit of variation in each of the notes in the chord. Let's turn this pitch down a little bit so we can get a kind of deeper sound. That's so sick. Okay, let's give it a little bit more release here. A little bit of attack here. And let's play around a little bit with the effects. Let's use some shimmer. And then send this FXA through to the post delay reverb. That is so sick. Okay, so I'm not going to go too in depth to like all the new features. I just want to talk about like what I think are the coolest new features. So they've also revamped the filters quite a bit. You can see here that they've actually added in a couple of their sort of analog emulations of some of their other plugins, like the Matrix 12, JUP8, SEMs, and that kind of thing. So we've got a lot more filters to choose from. But another really, really insane feature for sound design is the new Vcoder. Reason being is kind of paired with their granular oscillator, you can get some really, really crazy sounds. So what I want to do here is just load up something random. So let's just go with like a vocal kind of sound. Okay, let's set this to granular mode. And just kind of get it to like generate these kind of random tones like this. We can even maybe pitch it down. Okay, so now what we want to do is we want to enable the vocoder. Let's set the modulator source to the engine that we use. So engine 1 in this example. And then what it does is it uses the pitch of the keyboard input as like a synth generator. And then you can use these parameters to kind of like control it. So usually what I do is I'll set this to modern and then add like extra effects after this, like filters and that kind of thing. So I'll kind of use this as the kind of oscillator, but then the granular just becomes like the kind of like the sound, if that makes sense. But then this will be like the pitch. Okay, let's add shimmer. This can also be really cool on actual just straight up synth sources, but then pitched up and down. So if we modulate this, we can get some interesting kind of stuff. But let's change the wave form to something a little bit more interesting. So basically what's happening is like we're determining the pitch with the key, but then the pitch of the oscillator is like the rate at which that sound is repeating. Does that make sense? Let's add some LFOs to like the pitch and the position. So then let's put a filter after this. Something like a band pass is really cool. Let's set it to like a random and then put this on here. Okay, so let's check out some of the presets that I've made for the update to Pigment 6 Factory Pack. So first up, we have just a traditional Soundtrance bass sound with the ability to kind of give it some tonal variations. Then we have this arpeggiator, sort of more traditional stuff. Then we have Howl Season. This is one of my favorite kind of sounds for this pack, just because it's kind of, if you know my sound, you know I use these kind of type of leads quite often. Very classic Psytrance sound. Then we have Insect Mushroom, obviously inspired by the famous Psytrance artists. This one actually uses a similar technique to what I was showing you with the Vcoder. Intelligent Life. This is another one of my favorite ones, just because it's one of those ones you can kind of just hold a single sound, play around with the macros, and get some instant results. So this is one of the more kind of physical modeled inspired sounds. This was using the new modal oscillator. It's kind of inspired by a plucky gamelan type of sound. With a bit of a spacey effect. And then we have a kind of 80s, 90s TV show inspired digital piano sound. Okay, onto the more kind of experimental bass kind of sounds. Cool. That's about it. Hope you guys enjoyed that. Let me know what you think in the comments. Huge thank you to Arturia for including me in this release, and I hope you guys enjoyed that. I'll see you guys next time. Cheers. Oh yeah, don't forget, to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet. If you want to support me, best way to do so is to check out my Patreon or check out my store where I have preset packs, sample packs, and all that kind of stuff for you to check out. So yeah, thanks so much. See you guys next time. Cheers.